Anyway, I don't often like to talk in public about these kinds of things because then you get labeled as a conspirator and stuff like that. And I tried to do that back in when I was giving my first lectures, and I always got thrown out of the schools, or they weren't going to accept me in the schools. So I realized it's kind of a hot subject, so I kind of avoid it. But since this has been brought up, I'll talk about it. Anyway, so this guy, he worked in on the Alaskan pipeline. He was a minister, and he thought that the ornery people he could go minister to was up in the Alaskan pipeline, because they were just building it, and 30,000 of these pipeline builders were going up there to build this thing. So he thought that's where a minister should be. So he kept approaching the organizing group, and they kept saying, no, we don't have ministers here. But they finally accepted him. So he went up there, and he became so good at it that they said, hey, you're doing a really good job for us. You're saving us thousands of dollars in counseling fees, and we'd like you to be part of our managing team so you can be a better help to the workers. You can be our mediator between management and labor. So then he got to be really good friends with some of the management team, which were some of the top elites in the oil business. And that's where he says, I was there and I was working with them, and they're the worst, ugliest people you could ever see. But, I cut it off at that point, because then he goes on to say these elite of the world. And he's talking about these elite. And he's saying, okay, so I won't go into that too much. But basically, then he left that position. I'll just tell you a little aside here. The aside is that he was with one of the oil elites who got to be really good friends with him. And this oil elite took him out to a place where they had just opened up a new well. And he was ecstatic because this was like the biggest well that they'd ever found. It was bigger than Saudi Arabia, and they just opened it up. And he said he'd never seen so many oilmen so happy because now they felt they're going to be free of the Saudi Arabia stranglehold. Well, then the next day he got a call from this guy, and he says, we can't open it. He says, you can't say anything about what you saw. And the guy says, why? Well, the government just told us to shut it down. So there's a whole story behind that I won't go into detail, but basically, we'll leave that at that. So then he kind of gets off the pipeline. I don't know what he's doing from then on, but what's several years between that time and then this guy calls him up. There's one of his friends. Hadn't been in touch with him. And I guess this minister was out lecturing. And so the guys, and the price of oil is around $30 a barrel. So this elite calls him up and he says to the guy, how's it doing? He says, you still doing your lectures? And the Lindsay is his name, Lindsay Williams. He says, yeah, I'm still in my lectures. And he says, where are you going to next? Well, I got Seattle and some other places. And he says, well, next time you go there, tell them the price of oil is going up to $150 a barrel. I said, what? I can't tell them that. That's ridiculous. And he says, tell them it's going to go up to $150 a barrel. So he goes out and tells that. And sure enough, in a few months, the price of oil goes up to $150 a barrel. So now everybody's thinking Lindsay's a prophet. He said, no, I'm not a prophet. I just got a connection. Just this guy told me about it. So now he's getting a little bit of a following. People are kind of listening to him. And then a few years later, the guy calls him up again. He says, tell him now that price is going down to $50 a barrel. The guy said, what? That'll ruin the economy. That can't happen. It's impossible. Well, sure enough, a few years later, or a few months later, price of oil goes down to $50 a barrel. So now he's getting some trust in this guy. This guy's really got a handle on what's going on. Well, then it was just, I can't think a year ago, now this guy's getting quite old. He's like 85 years old, and he's got a disease, and he's going in for surgery. And so he calls up Lindsay, and I forgot the first part of the story was that, maybe it's not necessary, but the first part of the story is that the first time he called, he told Lindsay, you can't tell people what you're telling them, because he wrote this book, Non-Energy Crisis, which was explaining how this Alaska well was buried. But this oil elite guy got really mad at him and said, you can't do that, you've got to stop it. And Lindsay was able to turn around into a nice conversation and get friends with him. Anyway, back up to a year ago. So anyway, this guy's on his last leg, obviously, of life, and maybe he just wants to get this off his chest, I don't know, but he starts telling Lindsay what the plan is. And he's saying that what we want to do is we want to destroy the Saudi Arabia. So we're going to drop the oil. See, Saudi Arabia's economy is based on $80 a barrel oil. They have to have that in order to pay for their bills and to keep their economy going. So if they drop the price of oil to $50, there's no way that Saudi Arabia can continue that way. So we're going to drop the price to $50 a barrel. We're going to destroy the dollar. We're going to make America so poor they can't rebel against us. And then we're going to have a war in 2 years. And he goes into more detail about that. But basically, that was he talks about the $1 trillion that were printed up that were basically given to the elite, which is what happened with this, this money that was created out of thin air. So, I mean, it kind of coincides with what David Ash is saying here, and I got that from a little bit of an independent source. And that's actually been a concern of mine for many years. I think anybody who's aware can see that these forces are building, and whatever the reason, war is of a strong potential.
I think the important thing to realize is expect a miracle. We're in a free will zone. And divine intervention is only possible if we ask for it or command it and do it in the right way. You see? It's all magic. You've got to know the right way to call on the power necessary to bring about the changes. And also we have the power of networking. So you see, if enough people focus every full moon on Jerusalem, all we've got to do is focus on the protection of Jerusalem, there will be divine intervention.
David, please repeat the quotation from Andrew Grzeszki I told you about. The crystal net, I told you about that one.
Yeah, absolutely. So the power of prayer, and this is going to be such a miracle, and it's already a foregone conclusion. There will be no Armageddon. There's going to be no war. The Dome of the Rock will stand there in its glorious golden glory, protecting Mount Moriah from the atrocity. You see? Because we are going to do it. Enough people are awake. And we've now got the focus for our prayer, which is Jerusalem. Pray for Jerusalem. Just keep the prayer constant on Jerusalem, and all will go fair. All will be well. Thank you.
Yeah.